they have a schedule. They want to keep to it. And they're going to walk out of there right on time.
That's right. Yeah, leading the way in that black suit there, I think she was number 11, is Katie Bishop. She is the closeout lead for today's mission.
Crew quarters is a pretty big place as you look into the hallway there. Talking about 26,000 square feet, and it takes up the entire third floor.
Yeah.
And the west wing.
That is true. That's true. Yeah, not all of that is used as crew quarters specifically. It also includes a lot of other goings on. Oh, here we see the crew coming down the hallway. Oh my goodness.
Here they come. Crew-9 leaving the suit-up room and now on the move inside astronaut crew quarters.
This is a big moment, and there's so many people who have supported them in quarantine who are lined up in these hallways, wishing them well on their journey. You can see them waving goodbye as they get in these elevators.
Yeah, Alexander Gorbunov on the right, Nick Hague on the left, stepping into the elevator with Shannon Walker.
That's right, and that poster that you see lining the walls of the elevator are signed by so many of the people who have supported this mission here at KSC. It's really humbling to see those posters as you step into those elevators.
A very nice touch and a thumbs up as the elevator doors close. Now they're headed down to the first floor, and as they do so, since we're talking pre-launch traditions, and we had a few of them, here's another one. Both Nick and Alexander signing their mission patch inside crew quarters. The patch shows, of course, the trail of a rocket launching. And you can see a Falcon 9 in there with the number 9 on its beak, along with a crescent moon as its eye. That's a nod to the Falcon 9 rocket in the patch. And we'll have much more on this mission patch with a deeper dive into the design coming up later in the broadcast, which, you know, Zena, your team, when it was your team, all contributed to the design of this
That's
patch.
right, yes. So this is a patch that I have so much affinity for, and I love the design. Nick and Alex will represent it well today.
And we'll have one astronaut and one cosmonaut. They will soon walk out of the doors here at the Neil A. Armstrong Operations and Checkout Building, so we are focused on the doors. There's Haley, I believe, right?
That's right. That's Haley, number 34, walking out.
You see the patches that the stickers that line the doors, a great tradition there.
Yes. One of
Crew
many
members.
reminders of all the history of this building. It's a moment of big anticipation. See in the blue suit on the right, Raja Chari. They're supporting Nick Hague's family.
And Administrator Bill Nelson is here, NASA Administrator, of course.
Yeah, that's right.
Right there
I saw
in the
him
bottom corner
on
in
the
the
far
blue
right.
shirt. The doors are open on the Teslas. They've allotted about 25 minutes to the pad with a security escort that will lead the way. We've got a on-car camera. We'll follow them as they go out there, so we'll get to see the same things that the astronauts see on their first ride ever out to Launch Complex 40 this time, which has been certified for human space flight. A recent addition to the capability of that launch complex out there at the Space Force, the 45th Space Force Wing, the Cape Canaveral Space Force Station.
Yeah, that's right. This is one of many historic aspects to this Crew-9 mission, and it's neat to have Nick Hague, who is the first person to launch as a Space Force member.
Ah, yes.
Of course, Mike Hopkins transitioned over to the Space Force while he was already on orbit. So he launched as Air Force, landed as Space Force.
An important distinction there, and I believe Nick said in his little crew pack, he's taking the Space Force flag.
Yeah, we get a really small volume of personal items, much of which we tend to take up with gifts. Oh, here they come.
There they are. Nick Hague, commander of Crew-9, with his crewmate, Alexander Gorbanov.
It's a big moment. Family and friends seeing their crew members
This way
in
to
their
space.
suit.
Yeah.
Yeah, so they'll have a chance here to say a few words with those who are closest to them.
Standing at a distance, of course, because the astronauts are quarantined for 2
That's
weeks
right, yeah.
prior to liftoff.
And their closest members of the family have been quarantining with them, but as we are actually getting ready to get on the rocket, we are taking all of the precautions possible.
What's this like for you, Zena, seeing your former crewmates in this moment?
Oh, gosh, at the same time, it is absolutely joyful, and it is also surreal. It's really fun seeing people I know so well in their suits, ready to go. I know firsthand how well prepared they are. They've been doing not only all of the normal training for a mission like this, but additionally working really hard to make that final transition into these roles that they weren't originally planned for. I know that they're ready, and gosh, it's amazing. I know how many people have put a ton of work into this. I'm ready to see them get to the International Space Station and get going on a long expedition. And they'll have a few minutes here to say hello, say some words with their family. There's Haley letting them know it's time to move towards the Teslas. And we'll hopefully have one extra chance for families to come up to the window of the Teslas as they're ready to roll off to the pad. A few final cheers, some photos.
And now they are getting into the Tesla. And as Zena said, the doors will close, the windows will open, and they'll have a few more moments with their
That's
family
right.
and loved ones.
You can see them hooking back up to that cooling umbilical connected to their little personal briefcases. Get them some air on their way to the launch pad.
Switching from the handheld to the in-car system, right?
The handheld system is actually in the back behind their seats.
So it's all part of it. Okay.
Yeah, but they ditch the little cooling suitcase as they walk out, just less to carry.
Gotcha.
This moment is such a mix of emotions. I know families are all at once so proud of their loved one. It's also incredibly difficult to know that it's going to be a long time before you see them again. Of course, we have a lot of great communications assets. It's really easy to stay in touch, but it is nevertheless really challenging to be a family member on the other side of this. And as a crew member, you are feeling so excited for this launch that's about to happen. You're so ready for it, as this license plate says.
They are ready for it indeed. And you've been down there on the ground as an astronaut support person with these crew members as they've been getting ready to. You were there for Crew 4,
That's
right?
right. Yeah, I was the support person for Crew 4. I was a backup crew member for Crew 4 as well. I've been on most sides of this this barrier here. I've been there as a support person, riding in the Teslas with the crew to the pad. I've been a family escort. I've been there as effectively the family member for a crew member. So I've seen it from a lot of different sides. It's really, each one is challenging and humbling. So I know firsthand all the work that goes into something like this.
And they are off on their way to Space Launch Complex 40 at Cape Canaveral Space Force Station. You can see the crew driving away from the Neil A. Armstrong Operations and Checkout Building, and this will begin a roughly 20-minute drive with a full security escort across NASA's Kennedy Space Center, including the Vehicle Assembly Building. And there they are, the onboard camera. I just want to follow up on a note that you said. You've seen this from so many sides that by the time you get to space, you will probably be the most highly trained astronaut to ever do a crew launch.
Well, I don't know about that, but I will be ready for it as well, that's for sure.
All right. Well, while we've got the astronaut and cosmonaut in their vehicles headed to the pad, let's hear from them now. And let's start with Commander Nick Hague, who spent 5 months in Iraq in 2004 in support of Operation Iraqi Freedom. Let's listen more from the test pilot from Kansas.
The point of the human exploration of space is to benefit everyone on Earth. My name's Nick Hague, and I'm the commander for NASA's SpaceX Crew-9 mission to the International Space Station. Space is really hard. It's dynamic, it's unpredictable, and we've seen that play out over the last several months. But that's no different than the way it's always been. And so it's phenomenal to be part of a team that you see them respond to that and throw themselves at these new challenges and figure out ways to make it happen. It just makes you really proud to be part of the NASA team. I grew up on a farm out in western Kansas, looking up at the night sky, staring at the stars, dreaming about exploring space. At some point when you're growing up, the childhood dream of going to space transitions to a professional ambition. And for me, that time was at the test pilot school at Edwards Air Force Base. I've been to the space station before. My first launch was not quite successful, and we aborted about 2 minutes into the flight. So what was supposed to be a 200-day mission ended up being a 20-minute mission. I was able to try again 5 months later and complete the job that I was asked to do, which was go to the space station and spend 6 months on board. So I was part of expeditions 59 and 60. Our mission hasn't changed. It's to get to the space station, conduct research, and come home. How we're going to do that is going to look a little bit different. This time, we're going to launch with just 2 crew. We're going to have 2 empty seats for Butch and Sonny, so that at the end of our mission, we're going to be able to bring them home. But one of the most exciting and challenging aspects of what lie ahead is how Alex and I are going to integrate into their crew. You know, they've been on the station for several months already, and it's going to be thrilling to be able to join them and get to work, doing that mission of discovery, conducting science, performing upgrades on the station, figuring out how to live and work not just in low Earth orbit, but how we're going to do that when we go to the moon and on to Mars. Safety culture at NASA is so critical. We manage risk every day. Just being able to watch the agency navigate those decisions over the last several months and balance the risk and the safety of the crew and the well-being of the crew and the vehicle and the mission has been phenomenal. What is crystal clear in that entire process is the commitment to making sure that when we launch crews, we're going to bring them home safe.
And we are on the road after hearing some really wonderful words from Commander Nick Hague. I like the part about him looking up at the sky and dreaming about space and translating that to a professional ambition. And here he goes. We also want to invite you to jump in to the conversation we're having right here on air. Send us your questions with the hashtag AskNASA on the platforms Facebook, X, YouTube, and Twitch. Astronaut Zena Cardman is here, and she is answering your questions and doing a great job of it. And so our next question is, well, Luke, who is just 8 years old, asks on Facebook, How tall is the rocket?
Oh, the Falcon 9 rocket is a little over 200 feet tall.
So that's roughly 20 stories if you think of a 20-story building, a hotel or a condominium.
Right. That's right.
I mean, it is a really tall rocket.
That's exactly right. Yeah, so the crew will be taking a long elevator ride up to the top of the launch tower before they can walk across the crew access arm. And at the bottom of the rocket, they'll have a chance to peer up at it from below. And at the top, they'll have a chance to peer over the rail and gaze out at the view. It is really actually amazing to stand on top of one of these launch towers and look out at Kennedy Space Center, many different launch towers here. But today, this one on Launch Pad 40, Launch Complex 40, is going to take Nick Hague and Alexander Gorbanov to the International Space Station.
Another question on social now coming from Nico Fuentes. He asks on X, why is Crew-9 launching from a different launch pad?
This is a launch pad that SpaceX has used to launch Falcon rockets from before. This is the first time that we will have actually crew, so people, launching on a rocket from this launch pad. And I think it's great. Now we have more options available. This adds some flexibility to the launch schedule. We have more and more rockets launching every week, and things can get a little complex. We have to not only abide by traffic laws, so if one rocket is launching, another one is not able to launch nearby, but we also have to dodge weather, as we are keeping an eye on today. And so having more than one launch pad is really helpful in maintaining some flexibility.
Initially, Crew-9 was supposed to launch on 39A, but they made the switch due to a number of factors to 40 and did a lot of work to get it ready.
Exactly right. Yeah, actually, this launch pad was not yet even human rated for their original launch date in mid-August.
2 years later, and they are ready for this day. We are now passing Kennedy's iconic vehicle assembly building. As you see, as we pull out the shot here, this is where NASA will stack its Space Launch System rocket and Orion spacecraft for Artemis II, sending 4 astronauts around the moon. It'll be the first crewed mission of NASA's Artemis campaign to establish a long-term presence on the lunar surface for science. And there you see it. What a beautiful shot of the VAB, and there you see in the bottom right the crew on their way. Fabulous.
My goodness, what perspective. Wow.
Well, speaking of Artemis II, the Space Launch System core stage rocket, well, Zenit made its final stop to Kennedy Space Center in Florida before it's going to get ready for launch. The commander of the Artemis II mission was in New Orleans back in July for the big move to KSC. And let's listen in to him now with a closer look at what's next for the SLS.
Hi, I'm NASA astronaut Reed Wiseman, standing here at the Michoud Assembly Facility in Louisiana, and behind me, our Space Launch System core stage is on the move. That booster back there is going to power me, Victor Glover, Christina Cook, and Jeremy Hansen around the moon on Artemis II. For the last 3 years, technicians have been manufacturing and assembling our 212-foot-tall Space Launch System core stage. In July, the core stage made the trek on NASA's Pegasus barge and shipped to the Exploration Ground Systems team at Kennedy Space Center in Florida. The core stage rocket's arrival now puts the biggest piece of hardware for Artemis II shipped to Kennedy at the Vehicle Assembly Building. It joins the SLS rocket's twin 5-segment solid rocket boosters and the Orion spacecraft, already undergoing testing and checkouts at the spaceport. That's a look at your Artemis Moon Minute.
The Space Launch System, with its 2 propellant tanks and 4 RS-25 engines, is the only rocket that can send the Orion spacecraft, astronauts, and supplies to the moon on a single mission. And as we continue to watch the crew here, they're taking that curve. That is pad 39B. And that's a live look as they are passing that pad right now, testing is in the works for the Artemis program there. Last month, teams at Kennedy Space Center.
15 minutes. Advanced team is complete with their actions and ready for crew arrival.
Okay, that's a good milestone that they've met. That just means that the advanced team, which got everything ready, is now ready for this crew right here that is driving on the way to the pad right now. But back to the note on the VA, or on 39B, and talking about the Artemis program. We have some video to show you about some of that training that happened last month. Teams are here. I hear that sound. That's the sprinkler system there, the fire suppression system activated as the Artemis mission emergency procedures during a series of integrated system verification and validation tests happened. Members of several teams practiced the process of getting inside and out of the emergency egress baskets and then exiting at the terminus area, and then once there, they got into an armored emergency response vehicle and then drove away from the pad to one of the designated safe site locations at Kennedy. Critical training for them that all astronauts do before they go on a mission. For more Artemis updates, you can scan the QR code on your screen that's coming up right there. Or you can go to the website, nasa.gov/Artemis-Roman numeral 2. And as we continue to make our way to Space Launch Complex 40, this is a live look as they are pulling up and going past Pad 39A. This is where all previous launches for SpaceX crewed launches have happened here at Kennedy Space Center. So today will be another first, launching not from 39A where they would have turned in and been there already. Now they're going over to the Space Force side and launching from Space Launch Complex 40. But what a great shot there, showing the venerable and historic 39A as they go past that pad.
That's right.
Over to the Space Force side.
That's amazing.
And you can see SpaceX working on their Starship launch tower just to the right of the water tower there.
Yeah, that's exactly right. It's neat to see a developmental program right next to one that is so operationally proven.
Absolutely. Great observation. And, of course, SpaceX, a partner with the Human Landing System, going back to Artemis, will be helping out with Artemis 3 and getting our NASA astronauts onto the surface of the moon. Now they approach the beach side where the road goes right down the waterway. This is a nice shot of the Atlantic Ocean and the beachside road that leads to Space Launch Complex 40.
Absolutely beautiful. And this connection to the ocean is one of the reasons the Crew-9 patch also depicts the ocean.
Very nice. As we take in this lovely view, we also want to give a chance for, oh, nice wave.
Oh, wow. That's awesome.
For the surfers out there, boy, that was a sweet one. Back to our crewmate here on Crew-9, cosmonaut Alexander Gorbachev is Crew-9's mission specialist, a first-time flyer who studied engineering at the Moscow Aviation Institute.
Практически самое неизвестное, что сейчас у нас есть. Поэтому мы все время стараемся изучить этот космос как можно больше, изучить, как устроена Вселенная. Исходя из этих знаний, этих фундаментальных знаний, мы, может быть, получим в дальнейшем какие-то новые технологии. My name is Alexander Gorbanov, and I'm the mission specialist for NASA's SpaceX Crew-9 mission to the International Space Station. Я родился в городе Железногорске, Курской области. Это примерно в 500 километрах на юг от Москвы. Мне нравилась, например, биология. И когда я был совсем маленьким ребенком, хотел быть биологом. Затем я познакомился с авиамоделированием. После этого меня мысль о том, чтобы стать инженером, в частности в космической отрасли, полностью захватила. И в старших классах я уже осознанно готовился. Я закончил Московский авиационный институт по направлению космические летательные аппараты и разгонные блоки. По образованию я инженер. Учась в институте, я также параллельно работал. После этого я поставил себе цель попасть в отряд космонавтов. На это ушло примерно 10 лет. В 2018 году я был отобран в отряд космонавтов. Международная кооперация – это одна из самых важнейших частей при исследовании космоса. Мне кажется, что когда человек выходит за пределы земной атмосферы, то он становится не только представителем своего государства или своей нации, но также представителем всего человечества. Когда я учился в институте, то ходил в горные походы, в зимние походы, научился нырять с аквалангом. Но самое вдохновляющее увлечение, которое у меня сохранилось до сих пор, это парапланеризм. Это невероятное, непередаваемое ощущение, когда ты летишь, и тебя сопровождает только звук ветра. Ну, я думаю, это похожее увлечение. С каждым годом все выше и выше. Чем больше занимаешься парапланеризмом, тем выше получается подняться на параплане. Соответственно, следующая ступень — космос, но без параплана.
Minus the paraglider. Well, we saw some beautiful waves for surfing, and then there were some beautiful views of paragliding. I haven't been, but that looks amazing.
Yeah, absolutely. I know that's something that Alexander is very passionate about. Hopefully I get to give that a try with him someday.
T-minus 3 hours and 9 minutes, and there you see the access road as we're going towards Launch Complex 40. The lead vehicle, part of the security team that's leading the caravan.
That's right. A little bit longer of a drive than it is to 39A. Gives you extra time for your launch playlist.
There you go. And I don't know what the playlist is for the car this time around. Sometimes the astronauts, as you know, post it on social media. We didn't get one for Nick, but you know, it got me to thinking. Sometimes it's just nice to just drive and just have the sound of the tires underneath you. You know?
That is true. Though
I don't know if that's
suspect
the case, but, yeah.
today I know that they are listening to some tunes.
Okay, so it is a good thing to rock out and get the adrenaline going. That's
Absolutely.
Certainly what the astronauts did on Demo 2 and many missions afterwards.
Oh, for sure. Yeah, it's interesting. Some people choose to have some pump it up jams. Others really want to relax and just get in a calm mindset. And it's really up to the crew members.
So this is pretty cool, Zena, as you're driving up and seeing the rocket in through the front windshield.
Oh, yeah.
There you saw the MRAPs just off to the side. Those are the vehicles. In case there were an emergency egress, they would use the emergency slide wire chute to get down there and get in those vehicles. But this is a wider shot of Slick 40.
It's a beautiful shot.
It is a smaller footprint than 39A. Of course, 39A, a very large NASA facility that has a very long flame trench. This one a little shorter, a little smaller footprint, about the third of the total footprint, but all the hardware is there that's necessary for a successful spaceflight. And today, the first time that we'll have a crew launch from this launch pad. And a lot of work, about 2 years worth of work, went into getting this pad configured and outfitted with hardware that can support a crewed launch. And you need a tower, you need an access arm. So I want to give you a little closer look at what we're dealing with. You can see there's the entire complex. And if you look to the right of the screen, that's the launch tower. You see the elevators. Astronauts will be going into those elevator doors. They'll then go up to the top and pop out right here at the top of not the very top, but the launch tower level that leads them to the spacecraft. They'll walk in the direction of those chevrons into this crew access arm, where you see a couple of the advanced team members from SpaceX looking out the window, and what incredible views they have there as well. And then that crew access arm leads to this, the spacecraft Freedom. It is a larger white room than we are accustomed to seeing over at Pad 39A, but it is very capable with numerous improvements to the current system. And there it is, a look from the outside. Outside the crew access arm and the Crew Dragon that is atop the Falcon 9 rocket.
There
little
she
wider
is.
look, and you can see all around the Space Coast as we have a beautiful day forming up.
And that Dragon spacecraft Freedom is looking good on top of a Falcon 9 today. Absolutely beautiful shot.
T-minus 3 hours and 4 minutes and counting. At T-minus 4.5 hours, we got a weather brief from the launch weather officer with the 45th Space Wing today. And though that shot looks beautiful there, we got a little blue sky mixed in there, there are some weather matters to talk about that the team is tracking. If you look here at the satellite view from the GOES satellite of Florida, you can see we've got there in the lower half of the screen, you can see the clouds developing and starting to push from the west towards the east. That is coming in our direction. That was expected, streaming some moisture over our area, according to the launch weather officer. It's all because of a trailing boundary in the wake of what was Hurricane Helene. It stalled out over top of us and has kind of concentrated that moisture over the launch site and staging areas. So here at the launch site, where the forecast is calling for scattered showers forming and pushing towards the Florida East Coast in the afternoon. Fortunately, our launch time of 1:17 p.m. Eastern Time is early in the afternoon, hopefully before those storms start popping up and developing. But they are keeping a close eye on it. And as a result, our probability of violation at the launch site for today is 45%. That would mean a 55% go if you're a person who likes your glass half full.
I do.
that's Cena. So we'll take that as a 55% go, and hopefully we end up on the good side of that. We're also watching the weather along the ascent corridor. That's a little more iffy even than the launch site weather, where the remnants of Helene have brought some precipitation and lightning over some of the areas up the ascent along the east coast of the United States. And this is important. This is something that the team is watching and they're tracking, and talk about why that's important when it comes to emergency egress.
Yeah, absolutely. Weather on launch day is a really interesting puzzle, and so not only the weather right here at the launch site matters, but all up the East Coast matters as well. And as Nick Hague knows firsthand, if you needed to abort and escape from the top of your rocket, your Dragon would come down on this launch trajectory somewhere on the east coast of the U.S., all the way up to about Shannon, Ireland. And so we really need to make sure that the weather and the wave heights are conducive to that being a safe place for a crew to land if they ever needed to.
So the weather in those areas is something, as you mentioned, they're watching closely. The conditions were moderate when they were forecast yesterday, but the team is watching. A quick note, Zena and I are listening into the weather brief that's happening right now. We're going to update you once that's complete. All right, I believe that was Launch Weather Officer Brian Sizik. Stand by. In the meantime, while discussing the weather, our crew, or Crew-9, is headed towards that elevator at the base of the launch tower.
Yeah, you can see them walking towards that elevator right now. I am sure they will take a moment to look up and really take in their rocket from the foot of that 200 and change foot tall rocket. You can see them doing the quintessential SpaceX flight suit lean back.
There it is.
The suit is designed to be most comfortable when you're in the seated position, so that
Not staring up at a 200-foot
exactly,
tall rocket.
yes,
This
not
is core on
exactly
countdown.
ergonomic for
T-minus
these
3 hours. Crew have
operations,
arrived at
but
the pad on
I
time.
can't imagine standing at the foot of your own rocket and not stopping to take a look at it.
Isn't that something? What a view that we just saw there as they
No
were
kidding.
craning backwards. We call it the rocket recline.
The rocket recline, I love that.
And
Should
into
be
the
a dance
elevator
move.
they go.
I have not been inside this elevator, but I suspect they designed it similarly to the one at 39A. There is actually a button for space. There it is.
There it is, right on cue.
Yeah, I know which one I would choose.
Absolutely. Well, it's, why go to the 230-foot level when you can go to space?
Send it.
Send it, indeed. And there's the top, and that's where they'll pop out. And the crew, as we showed you in our little mini tour, will follow those chevrons on the ground, which are also there in white, high contrast with the black paint, so they can be seen in the case of an emergency egress.
Yep, that's exactly right. This launch tower is well designed for humans. It's part of the long process to get it rated for these crew members, Nick and Alex, today. And there's Luke Delaney, number 43. You can tell by his red name tag, a little bit different than the SpaceX ninjas.
Yeah. And there's some important differences between this crew tower. This elevator takes the crew all the way up to the level of the crew access arm, as opposed to at 39A, they have to actually go up a few flight of stairs.
That's exactly right, which is no easy feat when you're in a suit like this. So quite nice to just go all the way direct in your elevator.
Yeah. Direct flight.
Mm-hmm.
And the crew access arm at 39A actually, I understand, has an incline. So there's a little kind of coming up.
Yeah, that's right. It's a little bit different than 39A.
And here they come. Commander Nick Hague and mission specialist Alexander Gorbunov walking the crew access arm towards their Dragon Freedom capsule.
They are all smiles, and I can understand why.
With phenomenal views to either side of them, walking confidently and certainly anticipating these next few moments where they'll get into the spacecraft and get seated and strapped in.
There's Katie Bishop, who is in charge of today's operations here at the Cape as the closeout lead for the SpaceX team.
She handed a Sharpie to Alexander
This is
Gorbunov.
core on countdown. T-minus 2 hours, 56 minutes.
Another
Crew
one
have
of those
arrived
many
at the White Room.
spaceflight traditions, signing the wall of the White Room before you get in your Dragon capsule. And these will be the first signatures on the wall, unlike 39A,
Yeah,
which is
here
actually
we go.
full
They
of
get
signatures.
to be the first. Isn't that something?
Choose a good spot, Alex.
Yeah.
No pressure. Oh, yeah. Very nice.
Good. Boy, yeah. He went big, too.
There's only two of them. They can take up twice as much space as they would.
That's right. Nick is a lefty, apparently.
That's true. Strangely, the astronaut office has, I think, a higher percentage of lefties than most of the U.S. population.
How about that? Wonder why
Random
that
fact.
is.
I don't know. Who knows?
I
Don
tried
had
to
it.
make some kind of observation of left hand, right brain, but
Yeah.
I don't know if that would work. Well, look at this.
What a
Taking in that view.
Yeah, absolutely. I love nighttime launches. Looks really spectacular as the rocket lifts off, but getting to see this view, taking in some final scenes of my favorite planet before getting in your rocket.
That's a great point. You walk down that crew access arm at night, and it's just black, but during a day launch like we have today, I get beautiful vistas the entire way.
Absolutely.
But night is fun for people who watch launches.
Yes,
And it
yes.
lights up the sky.
Yep.
We've got a split screen now showing you the crew access arm, exactly where those astronauts are inside, and then our look inside it on the right-hand side. Nick Hague and Alexander Gorbanov having a little chat there about their final instructions to ingress, which means just get inside of the capsule. And their signatures. The first two signatures on this wall that no doubt will be filled with signatures over the coming years as crews continue to launch from this now human-certified launch pad.
That's right. The first two of many.
And we've got one already in the seat.
There we
Alexander
go.
Gorbanov taking his spot in what is typically the pilot's seat, but as the mission specialist in a crew of two, he'll be sitting there right next to Nick Hague, who now takes his or kind of falls into it.
Yeah, so this is that was really funny to watch
This is
actually,
Core
Nick,
on
because
countdown.
he
T-minus
is
2 hours
used to
53.
training.
Crew have ingressed the capsule.
Used to training in seat number 3, so the seat that Alex is sitting in. You saw Nick lean to the right. He's used to dodging location 8 where the displays are to the right to get around it.
Ah,
It's one of the many human aspects of training for something like this.
yes. And while they're getting situated, just wanted to catch you up on the weather brief that we listened to. The launch weather officer, Brian Sizik, in this case, was observing a line of storms that are headed our way over Florida right now. They're coming up from the southwest, and that's what's contributing to our launch day forecast. Our winds are 10 miles per hour out of the south-southwest. Temperature is a nice warm 87 degrees. And we are 45, well, that should say 45% probability of violation, unless that's changed. I hadn't heard that it did.
It may be evolving as we speak.
It could
I'm
be.
not sure.
But the concerns that they have are cumulus clouds, flight through precipitation, and surface field electric rules. And so as you're looking now, you can see this is our satellite imagery updated from the GOES satellite live, and you can see from the southwest portion of the state of Florida coming up from the Naples area that streaming moisture from a stalled boundary that's coming in our direction. Of course, the Cape is indicated by the little point that you see there, the little protrusion along the coast of Florida right there in the center. And so that is heading our way, and he is forecasting that to arrive in about an hour, and says from there we're going to have spotty storms off and on. So you've trained for this mission, so you know this well. As we go along through the count, things really get locked in once you start tanking at T-minus 35 minutes. But at 2 hours and 51 minutes, they can afford to continue to walk along and go through the launch preparation procedures until that moment and see if this is going to be something that could be a problem for launch or not.
Yeah, that's exactly right. I think in spaceflight and in life, it's important to remember that being an optimist and a realist are not mutually exclusive. And so even as we are continuing to monitor this weather, we are going to progress in hopes of weather clearing and everything be come and go for launch. Of course, once we get to that launch minus 35-minute time frame as we are making the decision whether to put fuel on board or not, that is a really important decision point.
And so our crew are now getting settled into their seats. It looks like Alexander has his 5-point harness on already and moving through his procedures there.
That's right. Yeah, it's really nice to have some help from these suit techs strapping us in on the ground. The seats are in a slightly more upright configuration than they will be for launch, and so that helps you with ingress, with getting in your seats. But it is still difficult to strap yourself in. You can see Nick is taking care of his shoulder harness straps right now, plugging it into the center point where all 5 points of that harness attach.
It certainly is cozy and comfy, isn't it? I mean, they're elbow to elbow.
Absolutely, yeah. It's pretty roomy inside as spacecraft go. It's a really nice cabin interior. And both Alex and Nick, because they are in the center seats here, can have a longer footrest. The two seats on the exterior can only have a short footrest if you have a large seat bucket. So I'm sure they're grateful for the extra leg room.
Absolutely, because they're going to be there a while. We got a 28-hour transit to the International Space Station once they lift off, and we've got another just a little under 3 hours in this position now. So
absolutely, yeah. And of course, once they get on orbit, they can get out of their seats and out of their suits as well. But they've got a few more hours to go. And here, where you are not weightless, it's important to be not only safe, but also comfortable.
And I did double check the probability of violation. We still are at 45% probability of violation, so 55% go with the weather, and that hasn't changed. Though, just to briefly recap, there are a line of storms heading this direction set to arrive in about an hour. And launch weather officer says they'll be off and on as they pass over the spaceport. But I have seen, it's rare, I think actually I only saw it one time, 80% no-go. And as long as it's clear right at T0, you got a hole in the clouds.
That's
and
right.
it's clear enough away. 10
one
mile
window.
Yeah, that's all you need. Throughout the program, we've been taking your questions from our hashtag AskNASA sites, which include Facebook, X, YouTube, and Twitch. Zena Cardman, NASA astronaut, has been taking those questions and enlightening those who are curious enough to ask, and we appreciate you sending those questions in. And next up, Zena, Craggy Williams asks, where was your favorite place to train?
Oh my goodness. You know, I love that we have so many different training centers. A lot of the training that we do is for the International Space Station. And we train all over the world, in Japan, in Star City, Russia, and at the European Space Agency in Germany. Most of my training happens at Johnson Space Center in Houston, Texas, and same for Nick Hague, my crewmate there. I love the facilities that we have at JSC. One of my favorites maybe would be the Neutral Buoyancy Laboratory, NASA's NBL. This is an amazing million-gallon swimming pool where there is a 1-to-1 scale mock-up of the exterior of the space station, and this is where we train for spacewalks in the EMU, the Extravehicular Mobility Unit. So that's a spacesuit, but different than the spacesuits that you see the crew wearing today.
And you can't understate the size of that pool. You mentioned 1 million gallons. This is like a gigantic indoor lake.
It's humongous. It's about 40 feet deep, but it's such clear water. You can see all the way to the bottom. It's really hard to judge the scale of it. But I still remember the first time that I was submerged underwater in the NBL. You look down and your hands are in spacesuit gloves. And that was one of the first moments where things felt really real. As a newly hired astronaut.
Right.
Another one of my favorite places.
Did you pinch yourself like in that moment?
Absolutely, yes. Absolutely surreal. But yeah, what an amazing place to train.
Sorry, you were going to say?
Oh, my other favorite places to train include also the Dragon Training Center in Hawthorne, California, near Los Angeles. This is where SpaceX headquarters is and where actually Mission Control Hawthorne is, so the Dragon operators on the ground, in addition to our Houston Mission Control Center operators. And there in Hawthorne, they have a capsule simulator that is a perfect mock-up of this Dragon spacecraft. It's so real that I've heard crews say they are convinced that the side hatch is going to open, and their lead trainer, in this case a person named Paul Weiss was our lead trainer for Crew-9. We're just convinced that Paul is going to pop his head through and say, okay, good job on the sim today.
I have heard other astronauts say the same thing.
Absolutely.
When they get in, this moment we're seeing right now with Nick Hague and Alexander Gorbanov is so familiar because of all that training.
Absolutely.
That the day, even the day of launch, that familiarity just takes over and says, oh, this is just the way we train.
Absolutely. It's so important to train in as high fidelity an environment as possible. And of course, there are some aspects of space, for example, the weightlessness, that are very challenging to simulate on the ground. But this capsule, it's really amazing to be able to train in a capsule that's such high fidelity and has exactly the same avionics and software, so that on launch day, you have been through this 100 times and the training takes over, you know exactly what to do.
That's the confidence you want to have when going to space, which, as we all know, many of us who worked in this industry for a while, it is a business that is not without risk. Our next question is coming from Kyla Ramsey. Kyla Ramsey Garza, I should say. She asks on X, my 6-year-old wants to know, what will Expedition 72 do for their research at the ISS? What kind of science?
Oh, there's so many different experiments that are on board or going to be on board. One of my favorites, I think, is actually ourselves, the human subjects. A lot of the research that we do on the space station is understanding what happens to people when you're in space for a long time. And that's because we're getting ready to go farther afield to places like the moon and eventually to Mars, where we will be spending longer and longer duration. That our body experience in space are very similar to populations on Earth.
Tex Frieden, I'm with you. Got you loud and clear.
Have you the same? Stand by for umbilical comm checks. Seat 2, Seat 3 for umbilical comm check.
Seat 2's got you loud and clear.
We got the loud and clear.
Core has you loud and clear. Umbilical comm checks are complete. Report when you are ready for seat rotation.
Freedom's ready for seat rotation.
Copy. We will report when initiating.
Starting off with some comm checks there, which is a routine part of this procedure.
That's right. That was the core. His name's Shiva in Hawthorne, California, talking to the crew just before seat rotation here.
Shiva is a former SpaceX broadcaster.
Yes,
Dragon, we
yes.
are initiating seat rotation.
A good communicator.
Yeah, good to hear his
Ready.
voice. I said former. He may be current. I apologize. But he has done launch broadcasts, so I recognize his voice.
Absolutely. And this is someone that Nick and Alex have had the chance to do simulations with in Hawthorne before. So it's nice to have a familiar person on the team.
And there they go, articulating the seats into launch position. Boots up. And now this gives them a vantage point to work those heads-up displays a lot better.
Yeah, that's right. With the seats in the reclined position, it's a lot easier to see and access those displays.
Freedom, seats are in the launch position.
Copies.
And also puts them in a much better configuration for the G-forces that they will feel on launch.
If you just joined us, welcome to our coverage of NASA's and SpaceX's Crew-9 mission, launching from Launch Complex 40. On the left, our flight operations team from the Kennedy Space Center is orbiting Space Launch Complex 40.
Dragon SpaceX, you are go for 4.100, Section 2, suit leak check prep.
Freedom copies. Go in section 2 of 4.100. Suit leak check.
And we are currently here in a split screen. With the left, you see the rocket, and on the right are our crew. One astronaut, one cosmonaut, getting ready for the second of 2 leak checks so far today.
Exactly. They did the first in the suit-up room at the operations and checkout building before they walked out and saw their families. This second one is because they have actually had a chance to open up the zippers of their suit. And we are now also zipped back up and connected to all of the systems of the Dragon. So their actual umbilicals connecting to the Dragon vehicle itself is one place where you might have a leak. So in the suit-up room, we've eliminated the variable of the suits themselves, and now we're just making sure that
Tear complete, ready for leak checks.
all of those interfaces with the vehicle itself are going to be good to go. And SpaceX will be...
Dragon, you are go for Section 3, suit leak check, including the command to initiate suit leak check.
They'll be actually getting telemetry from the suits,
Copies. Go in section 3. Suit leak checks in work.
including exact pressures as these suits begin to inflate.
Right there on the heads-up display, they can see all the pressures of the suit. It's nice.
Actually,
Or is it in the
we
iPad?
can't. Yeah, so neither. The operators in Hawthorne are monitoring the
I
exact
see.
pressures of the suit. On the displays, you basically get a good or not good. A check mark whether your suit has passed the leak check or not. And so it's amazing to have those really competent operators in Mission Control Hawthorne who are looking at all of the detailed telemetry of the suit. But of course, because we have done so many leak checks at this point, and we've spent a lot of time pressurized in the suit, you really get to know kind of the characteristics of exactly your suit, what a nominal rate of inflation feels like, what 2.5 or 4.5 pounds per square inch feels like. So you can see them starting to get jet-poofed now as those suits pressurize.
Jet-poofed?
Yeah.
Is that an official astronaut term?
It is now. And you can see the crew they tend to keep their hands up by the displays, and so that keeps your hands in a good configuration where you could actually interact with the displays if you needed to, but once the suit is pressurized, it's really difficult to move around. As I mentioned before, it's about the pressure of a regulation volleyball, so imagine yourself inside a person-shaped volleyball trying to move your arms and legs around. It's a lot of force to work around.
And you experienced that when you were doing your training, your underwater and beyond. Now, granted, that's a different suit. That's for your
That's true.
EVAs,
That's right. Yeah.
But it's still that pressure, and you can see the limited movement when somebody is in a pressurized suit.
That's right. Yeah. So this pressure that the crew are at now in their soft IVA suits, so launch and reentry suits, is about half the pressure of the EMU.
Oh, how about that?
They're going to about 2.5 pounds per square inch here on screen now. And for spacewalks, we go to 4.3 psi. That large suit, it looks really bulky.
And Dragon, no concern, closeout lead is just jumping in to double check something.
But it's actually incredible for mobility, having that hard upper torso and rotating bearings on the shoulders and the waist. We've got the closeout crew taking some pictures of Nick and Alex now. This will just give them some good verifications and the ability to send those pictures to a whole team of people who will take a look at it, make sure everything is good to go. And you can see in seat 4 and seat 1, we've got some extra mass simulators.
Dragon, we show 2 healthy suits.
Yeah, Freedom copy. 2 good suits.
And there's that core Shiva who is confirming 2 good leak checks. And there they go, deflating.
Dragon, with that, closeout team is going to be performing their final closeout steps and exiting the capsule. Please proceed to section 4 for side hatch close and report when you are ready for hatch closure.
Copies.
So at this point, we are preparing to close that side hatch where the closeout crew have been coming in and out of the Dragon capsule. Of course, we want to make sure that you have a good suit and a good leak check before you close that hatch, just in case somebody needed to help with your suit.
Make sure all that's in order, because when you close that side hatch, that is another big milestone in the march towards liftoff.
That's Freedom. We're ready for side hatch closure.
That's right.
SpaceX copies.
Currently scheduled an instantaneous window at 1:17 and 21 seconds Eastern Time.
About 2.5 hours from now, we are making great progress. And there's a bit of buffer built into this timeline, especially for side hatch closure, because something even as small as a human hair can actually cause a slight leak when you do a pressure check on that hatch seal. And so we really want to take our time and get it right. But if we do see anything, there is still the chance to open the hatch back up, inspect it, remove whatever tiny thing might have been in the way, reclose it, do another leak check, and still launch on time.
And we've had that happen.
Exactly. That's exactly right.
Yeah.
Yep.
You want a really good seal between you and space.
Yes, indeed. Yes. Hatch closure coming up next. This is really momentous, and even in the capsule simulator, it still feels like a really significant moment when they close that side hatch. You really feel like a crew in your spacecraft getting ready for launch.
Dragon, SpaceX for a Tetris comm check.
Freedom's with you.
Encore has you loud and clear. Tetris comm check is complete. Stand by for comm checks with the DC, MD, and LD in the launch configuration.
SpaceX Freedom, DC on countdown 1, comm check.
DC Freedom, I've got you loud and clear.
DC loud and clear. Stand by for comm checks with MD.
Dragon, MD on countdown 1, comm check.
MD Freedom, I've got you loud and clear.
MD, loud and clear. Stand by for comm check over Dragon to ground. Dragon, MD on Dragon to ground, comm check.
MD Freedom, I've got you loud and clear, Dragon to ground.
MD, loud and clear. Stand by for comm checks with LD.
And Freedom's LD on countdown 1 with a comm check.
LD Freedom, loud and clear.
And LD, I have you loud and clear. Stand by for comm check over Dragon to ground. Freedom LD on Dragon to ground with a comm check.
LD Freedom, loud and clear on Dragon to ground.
I have you the same, Freedom. Let's keep that storm salsa coming.
I'm with you.
And Freedom, with that, launch configuration comm checks are complete.
Copy all, Sula.
So, Zena, they just completed a number of communication checks with the crew, and there are a number of paths, right, that the launch team has in order to communicate with the crew.
Absolutely. There are multiple different communication loops to the Dragon capsule, and with multiple different ground operators. We have some people actually here in Florida with us, so that's the launch director, the mission director in Hawthorne, the core, who is like the Houston Capcom. And so we want to check all of these different communications loops with the crew before we close that hatch and lift off.
And just another quick update on the weather. Those storms that we talked about excuse me, 45 minutes to an hour ago, are set to arrive here along the Space Coast. So we're going to be getting some rain in the area, not necessarily a problem at this stage of the countdown. but you can see it's all coming from the southwest. You can see the bubbling up of the storms there in the southwest portion of Florida, then moving across the state towards the east and towards the spaceport. So if you're in the area and you are camping out or getting ready to watch the launch, be aware that we got some storms in the area.
Definitely lots to keep an eye on. Any launch is a complex puzzle of many components, so this one will be interesting as it unfolds today.
T-minus 2 hours and 25 minutes and counting. I'm Daryl Nail with NASA, joined by NASA astronaut Zena Cardman, as we are walking you through the milestones as Crew-9 is prepared to lift off today at 1:17 p.m. Eastern Time. We are split screen on the right, Crew-9, a crew of 2
Dragon,
for this launch.
The closeout team is in their final steps in preparation for side hatch closure. Please stand by for that and the state machine transition to pad hatch closed, and ensure all items are secure from now through launch.
So as you heard, the
Freedom copies all.
core, a man named Shiva, coming to you from Hawthorne, is letting the crew know we're getting ready for those final steps before side hatch closure. And he let the crew know to keep all of their articles attached to them. That's because now, at this point, once the side hatch is closed, if you were to drop anything in the capsule, we would need to open that side hatch back up in order to retrieve it. So all of their tablets and stylus and their knee boards are going to stay attached to their legs there. On the left, you can see the closeout crew removing some of the final pieces of protective material that you have over the side hatch seals as the crew ingress the capsule. You would not want to damage the seal or anything related to the hatch on your way in. And we remove that just before side hatch closure. The closeout team is now taking photos, all per procedure, so that we have something to reference in case the leak check is even slightly different than expected.
And we saw just earlier on the left-hand side of the screen the flashlight, bright light, shining, taking
That's
a close
right.
look at that seal.
Exactly, doing some really thorough inspections here and photo documenting as we go.
Now's an opportunity to take some more social questions. Zena, what do you think about that?
I'm ready.
All right. Of course, if you want to submit a question, we are taking your questions throughout the broadcast. Just punch in hashtag AskNASA to following platforms, Facebook. So if you want to submit a social question as we watch the SpaceX team do the final maneuver of closing the hatch, just go to our platforms, Facebook, X, YouTube, and Twitch, and put in hashtag AskNASA. This question coming in from SpaceX's Haley Esparza. Xena, why are you so cool?
Oh my goodness, probably because I have such cool friends. Like SpaceX Ninja number 34.
Is she out? She's not out there, is she?
Not today. She's not on the launch tower, although she has certainly been there in the past.
So she's
she wrote
somewhere with her cell phone sending in a question.
Exactly.
We appreciate that, Haley. Thank you very much.
That's right. Yeah, she sent the crew off in the Teslas.
So you know Haley pretty well.
I know Haley really well. She has been an amazing support person for all of the crewed launches on the SpaceX Dragon capsule. Really from the very start. I actually first met her at Bob and Doug's Launch 4 Demo 2.
Yes. Back in 2000, the first flight of NASA astronauts on a SpaceX Falcon 9 and Dragon. Yeah. And it was the return, of course, of the ability for NASA to fly to the International Space Station from American soil.
Absolutely. Historic first in 2020. Doesn't feel like that long ago, but so much has happened since then when it comes to crew launches from Florida.
When you count Demo 2, 9 total at roughly 2 a year.
9 NASA missions, and SpaceX has also launched multiple non-NASA missions. It's really amazing to see how much diligence it takes to get this side hatch closed. A really meticulous process, but that is a very important piece of equipment, so we want to get it right.
And that side hatch needs to stay closed throughout the space flight for the 6-month increment.
It sure does.
All the way until, and it won't open again until they splash down in the ocean.
That's right. Yeah, its current planned next reopening would not be until February 2025.
So close her up good.
Yes, indeed. Number 11 there again is the closeout lead, Katie Bishop, who is keeping us on schedule. She's got a play-by-play of every minute of this launch countdown.
Keeping everybody on time.
Yes, indeed. Integrating many teams who are working together to make this launch happen today, including the crew inside the Dragon capsule, the closeout team in the white room there, as well as teams on the ground.
Which is quite the coordination because there are so many people supporting this launch today.
It really is, absolutely. I think that's one of the most humbling aspects of being an astronaut is realizing how many people support an endeavor like this.
As we watched the side hatch getting closed, note that we are at T-minus 2 hours and 16 minutes and counting from liftoff of the Falcon 9 from Space Launch Complex 40 at the Cape Canaveral Space Force Station. To bring you up to speed, if you're just joining us, Crew-9 is currently inside Dragon Freedom. It's a crew of 2 today. Commander Nick Hague. It's his second flight to the International Space Station. And we also have a first-time flyer on this mission, Mission Specialist Alexander Gorbanov. So far, they have completed their comm checks and making sure they can communicate with the teams here on the ground. You see the technicians on the outside, on the left screen, working to close the hatch, but they got to make sure that seal is clean first and documented. And on the right-hand side, we see our 2 crew members Their seats have rotated from upright to their reclined launch position, which allows them to see and access their display panels. They have also completed their suit leak checks to make sure their spacesuits are working properly, and we got a good confirmation of that. The closeout lead verified the cabin environment was good, and they all exited or I should say egressed the spacecraft and began their procedures to close the side hatch of the Dragon spacecraft. If you've been watching us since we came on the air at 9:10 a.m. Eastern Time, I'm NASA's Daryl Nail with NASA astronaut Zena Cardman. And we're providing you audio commentary right now, but we will expand our live coverage around 12 p.m. Eastern when we will come on camera and invite additional commentators to walk us through today's launch and ascent.
It's going to be a really exciting day here. We're a little over 2 hours from launch. And I am just so excited to be here with you, Daryl. This is a crew I know really well. I'm excited to watch them launch to the International Space Station today.
And we couldn't be happier to have you, Zena, here as well. You trained with this crew, you know this crew, and you have great insight, and we appreciate you sharing that with the audience.
Absolutely, yeah. These two especially feel like not only colleagues, but family and friends. We've been working really hard together for about the last year and a half, getting ready for this mission. And as we've said before, it takes a huge team of people to make a space flight like this happen. I'm proud to be one of them.
And Dragon, we're doing final photo verifications on the side hatch seals. We'll let you know when we're stepping in the side hatch closure.
Freedom copies, thanks.
I think one of the hardest parts for crew at this point in the countdown to launch is just waiting. Yep. Yeah, you'll see some crews play games amongst themselves, almost like road trip games.
Thomas Pesquet, he was, I remember it during his launch, and the number escapes me, but they were playing some games.
I remember training with Crew 4 and playing some word games with them.
Yeah.
Try to guess your crewmates to guess the word, almost taboo style.
There's some waves from our crew.
Waving goodbye to their closeout team, and this is...
There they go.
And Dragon, side hatch is coming closed. Expect a state machine transition to that hatch close shortly.
A big moment during the launch countdown.
Freedom copies.
And that state machine transition that they mention is the flight computer state on board the Dragon. So that software is transitioning now to a state where the vehicle knows its side hatch is closed.
What does it feel like and what does it sound like when they close that hatch?
It's really difficult to hear the hatch itself closing. At this point, the crew are in their suits with their visors down and their earpieces are in. And so you really are getting only muffled sounds from the outside world.
Do you get like a little pressure change, when you seal something up like that
Yeah,
sometimes?
Not that I have actually noticed. Not significant enough to make my ears notice.
Okay. As they're working to secure that hatch, let's talk a little bit about the crew. And we'll start with Nick Hague. He's a U.S. Space Force colonel and he is the Crew-9 commander today. He was selected by NASA as an astronaut in 2013. This will be his second space flight to the International Space Station. In 2018, he and his Soyuz crewmate experienced a catastrophic rocket booster malfunction after launch. They were forced to abort but landed safely. 5 months later, Haig launched on another Soyuz and served as flight engineer for expeditions 59 and 60. He spent a total of 203 days in space and performed 3 spacewalks. The Kansas native is a test pilot and a distinguished graduate of the United States Air Force Academy. Nick spent 5 months in Iraq in support of Operation Iraqi Freedom. He voluntarily transferred from the United States Air Force to the U.S. Space Force in 2021 and is an active colonel. His wife Katie is a retired U.S. Air Force colonel, and they have 2 sons.
Absolutely. Nick is an amazingly qualified astronaut. He's brilliant. He basically taught orbital dynamics, actually, at the Academy. So he's quite smart, but he's also incredibly kind, a really thoughtful teammate. He's the kind of person when you're out doing some training in the field in a very cold winter environment who is up late boiling water so that his teammates can have a hot thermos before they go to bed.
Oh, wow.
Really thoughtful teammate. I absolutely loved
Dragon, we are commencing health checks for the launch escape system. Expect a momentary state change followed by a transition back to pad hatch closed.
Okay. Progressing along nicely.
Freedom copies. Thanks for the heads up.
It's an expected call from the core, the communicator Shiva in Hawthorne. I really loved doing spacewalk training with Nick. He's a veteran of multiple spacewalks, and so for myself, a rookie of both spaceflight and spacewalks, it was incredibly valuable to get to train with him. He's the kind of person where if you have stored one of your bits for one of the tools in a difficult to reach location and you're sitting there struggling, he's just reaching over and helping you retrieve it and has put it on your tool before you can even think to complain out loud. Exactly.
Wow.
Great teammate.
And in this configuration today, he has a lot to be thinking about, to your point there. He is commander, but he's also does not have a pilot per se. He has a fellow crewmate, mission specialist, who's sitting in the pilot seat, but he's not trained to be a pilot today. So more responsibility is on Nick in this position.
Yeah, that's exactly right. He's really in a mindset today of being both spacecraft commander and pilot. Alex Gorbanov, our crewmate there, who would normally be sitting in the seat all the way to your left, is moved over. We specifically wanted him at the displays so that he can help Nick monitor and be value added as able. But it takes, as you know, many months of training to be fully qualified as a pilot. And so Nick is taking on a lot of responsibility today. He is well qualified for the job.
Speaking of Gorbanov, he is our mission specialist today and a first-time flyer. So Nick will get to see his reaction as he goes into space for the first time. He studied engineering with qualifications in spacecraft and upper stages from the Moscow Aviation Institute. Gorbanov graduated from the military department with a specialty in operation and repair of aircraft, helicopters, and aircraft engines. Before his cosmonaut selection in 2018, he worked as an engineer for a rocket space corporation and helped support cargo spacecraft launches from the Baikonur Cosmodrome.
Alex is a brilliant engineer. He's always got really insightful questions. I've loved getting to train with him, especially because he has experience with other types of spacecraft.
And knows a lot about it.
Absolutely. Yes, he was trained in the mission specialist role. He was always very engaged, asking thoughtful questions, keeping track of procedures.
One note on that storm that we were telling you about that is now here. You can see it on your screen there, and the raindrops hitting the lens. So it is raining at the launch site right now. It's
Some classic Florida weather for you.
It certainly is.
Nice and sunny before. Here we are.
That's right. And we're expected to bounce back and forth between rain and calm conditions, according to the launch weather officer. So this was not unexpected. It was part of the probability of violation. You can even see the raindrops falling past the crew access arm. So the pad's getting a nice dousing, a nice soaking out there, but not to worry about any of the hardware out there. The rain itself is not an issue. So far, there haven't been any lightning strikes detected in this cell that is currently over top of us, so that's good. But it is moving. It's moving about 20 knots to the northeast. It passed over Florida on its way to us. And we've heard the SpaceX launch director communicating with our launch weather officer for today, Brian Cizik, about this storm. So they've been tracking it the whole way. And it's worth noting, even as we're getting a little rain, that as once hurricane has now been downgraded, Hurricane Helene passed over a few days ago, it left this, which is a stalled boundary over the middle of the state of Florida. And you can see there, it's really bubbling up to the southwest and then funneling over top of us. We're expecting spotty showers off and on through the rest of this countdown. But what is really going to matter is, excuse me, what the weather is at just before T-minus 35 minutes, so around the T-minus 50 to 45 mark, where they'll look at this weather and be able to predict whether or not there will be storms at T0. At this point, it's a little tough to call, but here's a wider view of the weather out here at the Cape.
Yeah, with really patchy weather like this, it can be hard to predict exactly what's going to be right over your rocket at T0. So we will keep our fingers crossed for today, but of course our goal is to launch when it is safe to launch. So we will be keeping an eye on this weather as we get closer to T0 just over 2 hours from now.
We're currently at T-minus 2 hours and 2 minutes and counting until the liftoff of NASA's SpaceX Crew-9 mission. We have one astronaut and one cosmonaut inside of Dragon Freedom, atop a Falcon 9 rocket from Space Launch Complex 40 at the Cape Canaveral Space Force Station. They are headed to the International Space Station to help maintain the orbiting lab as well as conduct science, critical science that benefits all of us. Both Nick Hague and Alexander Gorbunov will launch as Crew-9 and then join flight engineers Butch Wilmore and Sonny Williams and others to become members of Expedition 72 once on board the International Space Station. There you can see the complete Crew-9 crew. Again, once on board the International Space Station, they will conduct plenty of science experiments, research, technology demonstrations, and perform maintenance activities. We kicked things off here at a little after 9 a.m. Eastern Time, just a couple hours ago. And we've had a real smooth countdown so far. The astronauts woke up. They were treated to a light breakfast. And they got their weather brief, understood the conditions. We're 45% probability of violation for liftoff. Moderate conditions along the ascent corridor. After the weather brief, they proceeded to get suited up. And then they jumped into their Teslas, drove out to the pad, ascended the launch tower.
SpaceX, we had a good side hatch leak check.
Climbed into their capsule, climbed into Dragon Freedom.
Freedom copies, good side hatch leak check.
good news on that leak check.
And just shut the door.
That's right.
So another big milestone complete.
Things going really smoothly.
Up next at T-minus 1 hour and 54 minutes, just about 6 minutes from now, they'll reset the crew arm, GSE, for launch. GSE.
Ground support equipment. And so the crew access arm, you can see it on the left-hand side of the screen there, is kind of the breezeway going from the launch tower to the Dragon capsule, which is how the crew get inside. And before launch, of course, that crew access arm will need to be retracted so that the rocket can depart the ground.
And we'll get to see that first time that crew access arm will pull away from a Dragon with 2 astronauts on board at this launch complex. The first time ever.
First time launching humans from Complex 40. It's an exciting day.
It is indeed a historic day. We're coming up on 1 hour and 59 minutes and counting.
Definitely see some clouds rolling through on the left-hand side there, but it's definitely worth giving it a try, just in case we get that
Dragon
launch.
SpaceX for post-ingress briefing.
Good window of weather at launch time 0.
Freedom's with you.
Dragon, so good news is we've got a healthy pad, Dragon is healthy, and Falcon is looking good. The story remains weather, as previously briefed. We're watching radar data in real time. Currently, we'd be no-go to launch, but we think there's a real shot of getting a clearing in the weather around T-minus 0, and the ascent weather continues to look good, so we've got a chance of going to space today. We'll check in as we have more updates. How copy?
Freedom copies. Good pad, good vehicle. And you're saying there's a chance with the weather. Outstanding.
So they just got their crew brief from SpaceX, and mostly good, except for the weather, but as Nick Hague just pointed to the positive side of things.
So you're
sounds
saying
like
there's a chance.
That's right, exactly.
That's right.
Well, from that left-hand side, you can certainly see it. It's a small storm with rain on the left part of the screen and a little more of a clearing area on the right hand. That is exactly how it is on radar.
Yep, we've got some patchy weather rolling through, but it sounds like the vehicle itself is in great shape. That launch countdown going really smoothly. Hatch closure right on time with a good leak check. The suits are in a good configuration. Crew members are doing well. So we'll just keep hoping for a good weather window just under 2 hours from now. And of course, we'll have a big decision point before we start to put fuel on board the rocket, because that's something that's harder to back away from once we start that process. So we really want to commit thinking that there is a very good positive shot of launching today before we start fueling the rocket.
That's right, because when that fueling operation begins, it's all very tightly choreographed. It's autonomous. All of the procedures, the flowing of the propellants, they're automated. It all happens. So it kicks off at T-minus 35 minutes and rolls all the way to that T0, locking in that exact second for launch.
Absolutely. And for the crew, it's a little bit different for every rocket, but for Falcon, the way we would do that is we would actually take all of that fuel that we've loaded onto the vehicle and take it off of the vehicle before the crew themselves would get out of their Dragon capsule. But weather scrubs certainly happen. Of course, we don't want to launch if the weather doesn't say it's a good day to launch.
Throughout the broadcast, we've been engaging you, the viewer, handing off your questions to Zena Cardman, NASA astronaut, through the hashtag AskNASA on Facebook, X, YouTube, and Twitch. And so we've got another question now from Santosh. See, want to be accurate with the pronunciation. Santosh on X asks, do they, astronauts, eat something before liftoff to space?
Yeah, absolutely. It's a long journey. These astronauts will be on a roughly 28-hour ride from the ground here to the International Space Station. Of course, they can eat while they're on board the Dragon spacecraft, but today is a long day, so they do have some breakfast. But their bigger meal was dinner last night, and we have an amazing support staff in crew quarters where these crew have been quarantining for the last week. And you actually get to put in some requests for a special meal of your choosing for that. We call it the ultimate meal.
And the chefs here are amazing. I hear they can make just about anything.
Absolutely. They are incredibly talented, and we have those people in place because the crew are in quarantine, and so we really want to keep them healthy and make sure that all of the food that they're eating is not going to be one barrier of many little puzzle pieces that all have to come together on this launch day.
Right. You wouldn't want any food poisoning happening, any kind of shaking, any kind of chance
no,
of the
indeed.
food.
No, indeed.
Not on this day.
Absolutely.
And probably good to get a really good meal as your last meal on Earth, because space food is different.
Yeah, it's different. It's actually, in my opinion, really quite good. I've had a chance to try a lot of it. Of course, everybody's different. Some people are more food motivated than others. And for crew members like Butch Wilmore and Sonny Williams, they didn't necessarily have exactly the menu that they would have chosen for this longer than expected mission. And so we all have to learn to be flexible and share our food with each other. But the ability to have a hot meal that you can share with your friends and colleagues is still really, really amazing for morale when you're in space. For their free flight on the way to the space station, they will, of course, have food in their Dragon capsule, but they don't have a way to heat it up, and so they'll be eating room temperature food, which is better than nothing.
So if you're a severe foodie, space food will be an adjustment. I can imagine.
Yes.
That's something you can live with for 6 months.
Absolutely.
I certainly would.
Yes.
We've got another question now. K Aerospace asks on X, how does the astronaut underwater training significantly simulate in-space conditions and microgravity?
Yeah, so being weightless is actually pretty similar in some ways to floating underwater. And it's really difficult to find an environment here on Earth where you could be weightless, but floating in a pool is a great way to practice. One difference is that, unlike in space, underwater in a swimming pool you experience water drag. And so that can be both a blessing and a curse. In the swimming pool, it is really difficult to get moving, but it's pretty easy to slow down. Whereas if you're doing a spacewalk on the International Space Station, it's pretty easy to get going, but it can be harder to stop. So you have to really think ahead and remember to decelerate yourself. The spacesuits that we use for doing spacewalks, unlike these launch and landing suits that you see Nick and Alexander wearing today, they weigh about 350 pounds. So, and of course that's on Earth. They're weightless in space, but they still have mass, and so they still have inertia. So it's really, really valuable to get to train for those spacewalks here on Earth. Getting to know all of the procedures, all of the equipment, and how to move in a spacesuit that doesn't necessarily move exactly like your body does.
And there's an extra spacesuit going up on board this Crew-9 Dragon today, and that is the SpaceX spacesuit for Butch Wilmore.
That's right, yeah. There is one already on board that Sonny has tried on, and we're sending up an additional one for Butch Wilmore, and that is so that when they come back home on this Crew-9 Dragon capsule, they will, just like Alexander and Nick, have a way to connect to the communications and the life support systems of the Dragon capsule.
All right, T-minus 1 hour and 50 minutes and counting. Let's take you inside Mission Control in Houston now, where flight controllers are constantly monitoring the International Space Station and the people living on board. We welcome in NASA's Nilofer Ramji, who is live there at Johnson Space Center. Nilofer, good afternoon.
Hey, good afternoon, Daryl. Thanks so much. This is Mission Control Houston here in the International Space Station's Flight Control Room here at NASA's Johnson Space Center. The team continues to prepare for launch, and it's led by Flight Director Nicole McElroy. Assuming weather is acceptable for launch, we will be launching the 9th rotational crew mission to the International Space Station under the agency's Commercial Crew Program. So about 3 weeks ago, the port where Crew-9 will dock was vacated by Boeing Starliner as part of the agency's crew flight test. Teams safely returned the uncrewed Starliner to Earth following a landing on September 6th at the White Sands Space Harbor in New Mexico. The spacecraft concluded its 3-month flight test to the International Space Station. Now, with the arrival of Crew-9, Dragon Freedom will be Butch and Sunny's ride home in February, as you said. Right now, the Crew-8 Dragon has been reconfigured so that Butch and Sunny have 2 seats available for them in the event of an emergency aboard station. The arrival of NASA astronaut Don Pettit and Roscosmos cosmonauts Alexei Ovchinin and Ivan Wagner earlier this month, and the departure of the Soyuz MS-25 on Monday with NASA astronaut Tracy Dyson coming home marks the commencement of Expedition 72, led by the new commander, Sunny Williams. So we currently have 9 people living and working aboard the space station, and that number will be bumped up to 11 for just about a week. During that time, Haig and Gorbanov will go over handover procedures with Crew-8, which includes a safety briefing and orientation. Then they're going to jump right in and help advance scientific knowledge and demonstrate new technologies supporting our efforts preparing for human missions to the moon. Following the week-long handover, the Crew-8 members, which include NASA astronauts Commander Matthew Dominic, pilot Michael Barrett, and mission specialists Jeanette Epps alongside Roscosmos cosmonaut Alexander Gorbenkin, will prepare for their undocking no earlier than October 7th. Direct handovers between crews allow for continuity of the activities and helps to ensure a continuous U.S. presence on the space station at 23 years and counting. And now, with under 2 hours before launch, we're going to send it back to you, Daryl, at Kennedy.
Thank you very much, Nilofer. A great look inside Mission Control in Houston as they get ready for the arrival of Crew-9, Commander Nick Haig, and cosmonaut Alexander Gorbanov. We're launching today from Space Launch Complex 40, and it's a historic day should we be able to get a launch off through the weather. Slick 40 previously hosted NASA missions NG-20, CRS-30, and NG-21. Those are cargo resupply missions. SpaceX did work for almost about 2 years to get this pad upgraded for human spaceflight. It's a long process, one that NASA walked alongside of SpaceX through those years of building out the infrastructure and making the necessary upgrades, not the least of which was the crew access arm, what you see there on your screen. Made some upgrades to that crew access arm that has 3 hydraulic motors instead of a linkage. The arm is 7 feet longer than the one at pad 39A. It's got a larger white room. It's built different, stiffened plate construction instead of truss. And the arm, you can't really tell from this shot, but it is horizontal and perpendicular to Dragon versus coming in at an angle. And this pad is also just a little bit farther away from the water that you see there in the background, the Atlantic Ocean. And that that calculation has to be taken into account for the if there were to be an emergency egress. That capsule would come right off the top of the rocket and go out over into the Atlantic and come down under parachutes. Well, that's a different trip from that location than it is from 39A even. So there's a lot that went into even some small things that you might not think of. Even the launch azimuth is slightly different from, and I mean, we're only, what, a mile away?
That's exactly right. Little details like that matter when you're trying to get from the ground all the way to the International Space Center.
The closeout team has departed the crew arm and is on their way back.
Freedom copies, and if they're listening, thank you guys.
Some kind words there.
We'll relay to them.
Nick Hague to the closeout crew who have strapped them in to their Dragon Freedom, closed the side hatch, and now leaving these two as the only one who will be on the pad for launch.
It's a lonely place, but you do have your crewmate there.
Absolutely. Yeah, it might seem, but you know how many people have been rooting for you the whole way, prepared you for this day, and are there supporting you for liftoff. So we have an enormous team of people here at Kennedy Space Center, in Mission Control Hawthorne, in California, and in Mission Control Houston in Texas.
Let's talk a little bit about the patch. We mentioned that at the top of the broadcast. It's a very special patch. One of the first tasks Crew-9 did was design this patch. This is their mission patch. It has since been modified, though, due to changes in this mission. And as you're looking at it here, you can see that it shows the trail of a rocket launching to the International Space Station with the constellation Draco honoring the Dragon spacecraft that will take the crew there. Below everything are what you mentioned earlier, coastal waves representing our blue planet, the global ocean linking all continents. You also see a falcon with a number 9 on its beak and a crescent moon as its eye, a nod to the Falcon 9 rocket. And the Delta symbol at the bottom there, used since 1961, signifies historic connections to the earliest days of space ventures. And you had a hand, you and your team, when you were part of this crew of designing it.
Absolutely. One of the traditions I love in human spaceflight are these patches that represent the crew and the teams who prepare us for the mission, prepare us for flight. And so our entire crew is able to contribute to the design of this patch, able to include meaningful symbols, even some of the colors that we used for the patch. The gold and the red, the black and the white are a nod to the maritime signaling flag for the number 9, another little piece of trivia. So there's so much symbolism that goes into a patch like this, and a patch that I've been really proud to wear on my shoulder for the last year and a half. It's a little bit modified today, as you mentioned, Daryl. It's been modified to have no names on the patch. Previously, we had the names of the 4 launching crew members across the top there. But as we have modified this mission to save 2 seats for Butch Wilmore and Sonny Williams on the downhill, we removed the names from the patch, and this was a gesture to, it's not just the people on the rocket who are a part of this mission. It takes an entire team to include my crewmate Stephanie Wilson, myself, and all of the people who have gotten Nick and Alexander ready for this launch today. So I'm really, really honored to see that patch that they've represented. We've seen it several times here on launch day in the operations and checkout building as they were walking out to the Teslas, and we've seen it many times throughout this launch day. And great seeing Nick and Alex ready there. We are doing well on the timeline. The Dragon capsule is in great shape. The hatch is closed with a good leak check. Their suits are closed with a good leak check. Everything's in a good configuration. We are just standing by for monitoring the weather as we continue to progress towards T0 in an hour and 40 minutes from now. Things will get a little more dynamic in just over half an hour from now as we get ready to do final checks before we put any fuel on board the Falcon 9 rocket. But for now, because we have some extra buffer built into the timeline for things like the side hatch leak check, we're in great shape. And the number one job of the crew right now is to just be mellow and be ready. You might see them wiggling their toes a little bit in their boots, keeping their legs from falling asleep as they're in this position. It's a long time to be lying on your back. You can see Nick Hague on the right there. He's reaching up, interacting with his displays a little bit. It's a great time to read through some of the procedures and cue cards that we have. These are all procedures that the crew have rehearsed many, many times before. But since they've got some extra bandwidth in the timeline right now, it's a great time to review all that material, so that when things get a little busier, they are fully ready to go.
We've seen in the past some astronauts so relaxed in this moment that get a little shut-eye.
This is true, yeah. We have certainly seen more than one crew member take a little bit of a snooze on the launch pad.
But you know you're comfortable and confident if you can do that.
Absolutely, yeah. It's easy to laugh at, but I think it's also a great indication of how calm and confident the crew are in the team and in the vehicle. They will definitely wake up when it's time to go. But doesn't look like any shut-eye for Nick or Alex today.
No. Yeah, nothing like a launch to get the blood flowing.
Absolutely, yep.
Well, this crew, they both got to bring on some special items from Earth to space. A few personal items for their roughly 5-month stay. And for this particular crew, here's a few of the items that they're taking up in space with them. Nick Hague, on the right, is taking a Space Force flag with him. It's, of course, something different than what he took the last time because Space Force, well, didn't even exist last time he flew. Nick said it's a privilege, though, to support all Guardians, the Space Force Guardians, who support human spaceflight and keep the crew safe by watching the skies and the cosmos every day.
Absolutely, and it's really exciting as well because Nick and Alex, as Crew-9, will be taking off from Pad 40, which is actually on the Space Force base.
Great note there, great tie-in. For Alexander, he has pictures of his family and friends and other personal items excuse me, that represent different milestones of his life. They include the patch of his 2018 class and the flag of the higher education institution where he graduated from back in 2014. And during interviews on board the ISS that we see from time to time, you will see some of the astronauts bearing the collegiate paraphernalia, maybe a sweater or a flag or something.
Absolutely, yeah. I think that's a common theme. Of course, everyone feels an allegiance to their alma mater or to their hometown. It's part of what makes us who we are, which is really a huge, important part of the reason why we make it to the International Space Station. We're bringing with us not only our professional backgrounds, but this incredible personal history.
T-minus 1 hour and 34 minutes and counting. We are just 4 minutes away from doing a health check on the launch escape system at T-minus 1 hour and 30 minutes. We'll hear that called out and communicated with the crew inside. As Crew-9 launches today, we get a launch. That only means that Crew-8, it will be their turn to come home.
That's exactly right. I know there's a picture of Crew-8.
Yeah, this is them as they walked out. NASA,
many months ago.
Yeah. Matt Dominic, Michael Barrett, Jeanette Epps, and Roscosmos cosmonaut Alexander Grebenkin. There you see them launching from the Space Center, and then, of course, they've been living and working on the space station now for 6 months. Once Crew-9 arrives, there will be what's called a handover for about 5 to 7 days, and then Crew-8 will undock.
Yeah, absolutely. That handover period is really, really useful. I mean, you can train for months and in most cases years to live and work on the International Space Station, but it's really hard to know exactly what it's like until you get there. So for rookie flyers, first-time flyers, that handover period is a great time to get a lot of advice from the people who are the experts who have been there most recently. And even for a veteran flyer, someone like Nick Hague, this is not his first trip to the International Space Station, so in many ways he's an absolute expert. But the International Space Station is changing and evolving constantly. So it's a great time to get to know what is new on the space station, what little quirks have changed, stowage locations, how things are working now, and a great chance to get that institutional knowledge from the people who have spent the last many months there. So I know Crew-8 is anxious for Crew-9's arrival because that means that Crew-8 can get home to see their families after a long and successful mission that's actually a little bit longer than even they anticipated.
Indeed, and a little longer of, a transition period. One of the first things we're going to do is get the Dragons deconfigured from what they were, where Crew-8 was configured in order to bring Butch and Sunny home in the case of an emergency.
That's right, yeah.
Deconfigure that, right, and then get Crew-9 configured?
Absolutely, yeah. So that is one of the most important things that we do during handover is configure the Dragon capsule to be a lifeboat in case you needed to leave the space station quickly. And so that's something we do for every mission. It's one of the most important pieces of handover that we do. So Nick is going to get that handover from Matt Dominic, who was the previous Dragons commander. But in this case, it's a little bit extra special because they've been configured to bring Butch and Sunny home for the last couple weeks. And so that would have meant 6 people coming home in a Dragon, but there are not, as you will notice, 6 seats. And so this required a lot of extra special engineering that a great team in Hawthorne, especially led with the help of a lot of NASA personnel, NASA flight surgeons, and engineers, making sure that that would be a safe enough option. But the better option would be bringing Butch and Sunny home in suits that interface with seats so that they have all of the life support systems and communications that you normally would in a spacecraft.
As we've been counting down, we've been paying close attention to the weather. Got another update here. Now you can see, well, there's quite a few storms in the area. We're right there at the Cape in the middle, dead middle of the screen. You see the outline of the state of Florida. We've got moisture that has been flowing over the state of Florida throughout the countdown today, and it's bringing with it some storm clouds. Our current probability of violation is at 45%, according to the launch weather officer, and that's a reason why. All of this is a remnant from Hurricane Helene's passage through and over the Gulf, which our thoughts and prayers are very much with the people who have been severely impacted by that storm, not only the Gulf of Florida, but also Georgia, North Carolina, and up into Kentucky, with some of the flooding that they've been dealing with, and some of the tragic loss of life as well. The conditions aren't they were not as nearly bad here. Had some winds in the area, but we're still seeing the effects of that storm having passed through from a meteorological standpoint, and this has left us with a band stalled out with moisture over the state that's firing up some storms. But all we need is just a little gap. So we know that it's not going to be a complete rainout today. We are having off and on storms. I just briefly stepped outside, looked out, and it was dry all around. But as I looked off into the distance, about a mile away, got a little rain coming down. So it's very spotty, and we'll see how it all plays out here. Everything else is good. We got an update from the core that said the spacecraft is healthy, the booster is healthy, the pad's good to go. So we're in a good position to take advantage of a little break in the weather, which is what we have for our forecast today.
Yes, indeed. With all of those other components all coming together, the vehicle is good, the crew are in good shape, downrange weather is looking good. So we'll just hope for a window in the weather right here at Pad 40.
You're looking inside the Dragon Freedom. This is the spacecraft that will take Crew-9 up into space, and there's a look at it from the outside. It is the capsule's fourth space flight. Freedom's first flight was Crew-4 and also supported private missions Axiom 2 and 3. Freedom was given its name by that man right there, Commander Kjell Lindgren, who said the name celebrates a fundamental human right and the industry and innovation that arises from the unencumbered human spirit. So far, Freedom has totaled 201 days in space. It will, of course, add to that number once it launches with Crew-9 on board and docks to the International Space Station.
One of my favorite things about a reusable capsule and reusable rockets like this is that you get to enjoy some of the history of that vehicle. A lot of the spaceships that we fly now are named after previous spaceships, which were named after research vessels. But this one is new and unique. What an amazing vehicle to get to fly in. This is actually the only Dragon that I have ever been in, but I've been in it twice. Once for Crew-4 launch, and once at CEIT, which is kind of a test drive where we get inside the flight vehicle for Crew-9.
And do they have some of their stickers up from previous flights?
They do. You may notice that behind Alex Gorbanov's head, just off to the left of the screen there.
I see it.
Not necessarily something we are supposed to do.
Oh. Xena has called you out, Crew 4.
Well, I can also say if I were in that spacecraft, I would be adding a Crew-9 sticker right there.
There you go. There you go. I mean, yeah, puts a little, mark there on the capsule, and I mean, you spend so much time in it, the training, the flight. It's with you there on orbit.
Yeah, I mean, this place starts to feel like home, absolutely. We're still about 40 minutes away from the go, no-go for propellant loading on the vehicle, which will be a big decision point for us today as we continue to watch this weather window here at the pad.
Yeah, that's the big one. The storm, if you look on the screen to the left, is now out at sea. It had dumped a little rain here at the space complex, but it is now almost completely offshore. There's more behind it, but we've got a nice little gap between the storms that just passed and the ones that are coming along the way. We can see them coming. They're about halfway past the state. Halfway, I guess, passing over the state.
Yes, indeed. It's actually really amazing to see the sun is starting to come out. You can see that on the left screen there, but you can actually also see it hitting Alex Gorbanov's right knee as it's coming through the Dragoncraft window. Great reminder that they are, for now, still on Earth. This is certainly not the first time it's been down to the wire for weather on a launch. I remember being here for Demo 2, the first Crew Dragon launch.
Oh, yeah.
We got so close.
There was a weather scrub.
That's right.
And then I believe on the second attempt even, there was also a storm cloud that was in the area, came into the...
Absolutely, yeah.
The zone of...
That first attempt, I thought we were going to go and we didn't. That second attempt, I thought we wouldn't go, and we did.
That's exactly right. That's exactly how it played out.
So it goes.
Thought the same thing.
Yep.
Well, we just got a few minutes before we welcome in our teams from our broadcast teams from SpaceX in California and Johnson Space Center in Houston, Texas.